Speaking of interesting things, we got the interesting things panel right here. This is what happens when I put, now this should be interesting, this is what happens when I put a bunch of people that I know very well on a panel together and see what they're going to talk about. This is Games as a Service, the new golden handcuffs. You're going to like this one. We've got, from the far side, we've got Rich Rowan from Auric Games. Brand new studio, started, what, 3 days ago or something? It's
15th
maybe 4.
15th.
Dave Ettery from Spry Fox. John Grandy from PopCap.
Formerly from PopCap.
Oh, is it official now?
Yeah.
I didn't want to say that. We got to change everything. Change it. Strike that. I'll modify this while you're talking.
Do you have a Sharpie?
Yeah. Jay Moore from the Strategery Group, industry evangelist and our moderator. So take it away, guys.
Okay, so today this is a session, because we all have most of the blood that's in our brain going to our stomachs, that is going to be as much on your side of it. This is going to be a crowdsourced session as well as the stuff we're prepared to talk about. Because from my experience, any good panel discussion has to end in fisticuffs, so we need you guys to be rooting for whoever is, we won't break you up on sides of the room. But to start, I want to do a little bit of just demographic analysis here. So how many people here consider themselves game developers?
Woohoo!
Okay, how many people here have actually shipped a game? Okay, how many people here are currently doing any kind of in-app purchase monetization structure? How many people want to be doing in-app purchase monetizations? Okay, that gives us a little bit, and you guys feel free to chime in with any questions you might want to have for profiling the audience, because obviously we got to get our metrics right so we know how to target. And that's part of the challenge, obviously, is that as we've moved from what used to be the model of ship and forget or build and have somebody else publish to, I think pretty much everybody here is a developer publisher now. There's a lot more that's come onto our plate, and so we kind of wanted to talk about that new dynamic, some of the pieces that might make it a golden handcuff, might make it actually so that we can have what we've always said we want, full creative control of our IP and the ability to exploit it in the marketplace. So with that, I want to jump in. You know, in the description we talked a little bit about the fact that now we have to be politicians and customer support and actually, in some cases, referees in our community management. But I wanted to kind of just have people share what they feel right now is one of the most difficult things that they have to do in this new model that requires them to have new skills, whether it be community management, any of those things that we kind of threw out there in the initial discussion. And I know, Rich, you're just getting, your spreadsheets up and and deciding how the model's going to work for you with publishers, et cetera.
What are you talking about? I'm shipping in 2 weeks.
There you go.
Literally.
Again.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, tell them a little bit about yourself. Just a little bit more on
So I'm an 18-year industry veteran. I've worked on PC games. I've worked on Xbox games. I did Xbox Live Arcade games, Uno for Xbox Live Arcade, casual games, MMOs. I'm working on my 8th MMO right now, which is about 8 more than most people. So I have some experience with the online
Have
side.
all of them shipped?
Not all of them shipped. 4 of them shipped. So
That's
yeah,
a pretty high ratio, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, and 2 of them shipped on schedule.
Whoa.
So,
and you were a producer, right?
I was the producer. So yeah, as soon as I created the schedule, it shipped on time. So
my head got shaved as a result of one of those.
yeah, it's true. It's true. So yeah.
Zashron's call.
Yeah. So I just started up a mobile game studio, acquired Dragonstorm MMO from Glue. So we're in the process of taking over the operation of that game. And yeah, so I don't know, do you want me to go into some of the challenges, or do we want to introduce everyone?
Where's your pain right now?
My pain right now is what I really want to be spending time doing is working on the game. What I'm having to do is spend time developing relationships with Apple, with Google, with Amazon, spending a lot of time trying to get my metric systems up so I can figure out what's going on, so I can talk to publishers. All of that stuff is
Google,
really
Apple,
complicated.
Amazon, he loves you. He just would rather work on the game.
Yeah, no. In fact, I enjoy doing that, but what the team needs from me is to focus on the game.
Yeah.
But because I'm the only one that can do that, they need me to do all this other stuff too. So I'm having to be, marketer, biz dev, and producer at the same time.
And financier.
And financier, yeah.
I think that's one of the things. There's so much more in a new venture in gaming now than there used to be.
Yeah.
Actually, David, you can probably speak to that because you've lived through this transition in a very caustic way in some cases.
I mean, it's been interesting. We've been at this for 3 years now, and we've put out a lot of games in a short period of time. And so we've had a chance to kind of see to learn what's easy and what's hard from experience. We did, because we had Realm of the Mad God, Tripletown, 2 versions of Steambirds. Did I say already Tripletown? Yeah, let's not forget Panda Poet. I mean, we've put out a bunch of stuff, plus a couple of things you haven't even heard about because we did a small release, decided they weren't fun, and killed them. So, and what's interesting is that I thought monetization was going to be the hardest part. And that's what everyone tends to think, the monetization is the hardest part. It turns out it's actually not the hardest part. I mean, it's definitely been a stumbling block. Like, we never got it right on Tripletown, for example. Although we have made decent money, but that's mainly because of just the sheer volume of people who've played it, not a function of the game's inherent, ability to make money. So that game didn't monetize particularly well. Steambird Survival Mobile didn't monetize particularly well. But we learned some pretty quick lessons from things like that. Like, maybe those games are lacking certain kinds of depth. I've given a whole lecture on this topic, which is online if you're curious. But to make a long story short, we applied the lessons we learned from those games to other games, and it hasn't been that hard to make money in terms of like High Grounds, for example, has a pretty reasonable amount of average revenue per user. As always with free-to-play games, most users don't pay. But the few who do pay a fair amount, and that helps kind of float the rest. So what's been hard for us actually has been, and this is why I want to share this because I don't hear people talk about this as often as maybe they should. What's been really hard for us has actually been retention, and this is probably because it's probably exaggerated and aggravated by the fact that we try to make original games, and so you have this extra challenge of, this is something you've never played before, so I first have to teach you how to play it, and just teaching you how to play it isn't necessarily all that easy. And then, of course, I have to get you to want to keep playing it for a long period of time because you're probably not going to spend money the first day. You're probably going to spend money in the second day or the 7th day or the 20th day.
Retention is probably a harder problem than conversion to paying or just average revenue.
Yeah, I mean, in our experience, which is no longer, I was about to say limited experience, but it's no longer so limited. Like, retention is consistently, time and time again, the hardest thing. And we, like with Tripletown, for example, I mean, a lot of people think, Tripletown, tons of people have played that. That's, that game that's a no-brainer game. Actually, no. I mean, that game had enormous retention issues. Still does. I mean, I'll never forget the first time we partnered with Playdom several years ago to publish it on Facebook because we weren't being able to figure out how to get it in front of a broader audience. And Playdom videotaped 4 people who they considered average Facebook gamers playing Tripletown. And it was the most sobering experience of my life as a developer. I've never seen anything like this. We had, just as an example, the very first playtest, I could swear that they put this as number 1 just to give us the worst news first. The very first playtest, there's the tutorial starts. There's a giant yellow arrow pointing at a spot on the board where you're supposed to click, and the lady is clicking all over the screen except for where the arrow is pointing, going, "I don't get it. I don't get it. I don't get it." And we were like, "Oh my God! Like what? How? What am I supposed to be doing here?" And the next few playtests were slightly better than that, but not by a whole lot. I mean, the next person figured out how to click where the arrow was pointing, but never figured out that matching 3 things created a higher level thing, and was just like, "This game is dumb. I just put stuff places." Like, okay, well, gee, that sucks. So anyway, so that's an extreme example. I mean, Facebook was by far and away the hardest problem for us. So I've never encountered an audience in my life that is less willing to learn, like less prepared to learn something new. I shouldn't say willing, because I think they'd be very happy to learn something new if it was presented to them in the right way. I think we failed to present it to them in the right way and never figured out how to change that. But even in mobile and in the web, what we're observing is, and I think this is partially a function of just how much free content there is now, is that people have always, like our generation, have always had a lower attention span, and it's radically lower now than I think it has ever been before, because there's just a billion free things you could play, right? So if this game isn't entertaining you in the first 45 seconds, why the hell would you play it? And that's why I would call this a new challenge, even though it technically isn't. I mean, people who have been having to make demos for their downloadable console games have had this problem for a long time, right? If your demo isn't compelling, your downloadable Xbox Live Arcade game doesn't sell. This was true, 8 years ago. It's no different from today. I think, but what I think is the difference of today is that there's just radically more free content available to them today than there was back then. I mean, if you look at the amount of free content on mobile devices, almost everything is free now, right? I mean, the amount of content being sold up front is dwindling rapidly. So
the re-engagement piece, with like Triple Town, you had a great compulsion loop. It taught you how to buy out of the store in the initial tutorial.
Yeah.
You had, easy to access, hard to master, all those elements,
Yep.
but the forgetfulness, I forgot, oh yeah, I like playing Triple Town, but I'd never go back to it because it just didn't have that stickiness.
that was actually not an issue for us. If we actually got you to understand how to play the game, we tended to hook you. With there were, of course, not, obviously that wasn't true for everyone.
Well, I'm not your audience because I play everything. But
Yeah, no worries. But no, but literally just getting people to understand it in the first place was a massive problem. And then some people would be like, I get it, but they wouldn't understand why it was challenging. They'd be like, oh, you just match stuff and higher level stuff happens? Like, who cares? And they didn't understand that.
they didn't have any friends kicking their asses.
Right, well, that might have been part of it. So,
Well, social is a very valuable piece of the games as a service, because then you have all your friends to challenge, and you're trying to beat them, and leaderboards and all that stuff comes with it.
Yep. But so to make this concrete, so not to simply say this is a horrible problem and not give you any advice, there's a bunch of different things we've learned that you should do. Doing them and doing them right and doing them in the right order is harder than, but I mean, it could be 2 hours just talking about just that. But basically, things like obviously having a good tutorial, but also if it's a multiplayer game, having a decent tutorial and single player ramp up. Turns out it's really hard, and some people who make multiplayer console games have known this for a long time, but it can be very hard to get people to play a multiplayer game that's only multiplayer. Like, you can do it,
Yes.
but it is a very difficult challenge. Whereas if there's a compelling single player mode, you tend to have an easier ramp. And an example of this is actually, so Congregate announced at GDC that, and they have a weird name for it. They call it asynchronous. They said if your game has an asynchronous mode in it, your multiplayer game has an asynchronous mode, it will retain and monetize at some radically higher rate. I don't remember the figure. It was like 50% better or something. It was an incredibly large number. And so we got all excited because we thought they were talking about asynchronous multiplayer, like people playing not at the same time. No, they weren't talking about that. Turns out their definition of asynchronous multiplayer is you playing against an AI-controlled opponent that is representing another real person. And that's what they call asynchronous. That's just friggin' single player with like the thinnest veneer of multiplayer on top. Turns out that causes your revenue and your retention on Congregate to spike dramatically. And again, why? Because it turns out that like multiplayer, if you can get someone into it, is an incredibly sticky thing, but getting them into it in the first place is really hard for a whole variety of reasons. People don't like getting their ass kicked if it's a PvP game. There's a lot of assholes out there who are going to, cuss them out in the chat room, and it's going to drive them away, or worse, right? I mean, we can go on, but it's a hard problem. So we've started looking at all of our multiplayer-centric games, which is the vast majority of the things we're making, and starting to put in Congregate's definition of asynchronous multiplayer, the better tutorial, working on, there's a bunch more I could say, but that's a start.
Well, and part of that is also just having somebody to play, right? If the game's small, there's not a lot of people on. So
And you were discovering things with videotape, but you weren't getting from mechanized, basically instrumenting your stuff for analytics.
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, it's amazing how many different kinds of playtests you can do and analytics you can do before you get all the full picture. Like, we were doing playtests, but there's a big difference between me standing next to someone and asking them questions and just this random video setup that Playdom had, where there was no one just hanging over their shoulder. And then separately, we got totally different information from literally just gathering information about what's happening in the game. And I can't say the sad part is after having all those different sources of information, we still never fixed Tripletown's short-term retention problem. But it has.
Do you think that was systemic to the play experience? It just didn't have the right. I mean,
I think Tripletown is the
go back
wrong
to the
game for
design
Facebook.
table and start over.
It's the wrong game for Facebook. Ironically, given that that's where we launched it, it does very well on mobile.
Okay.
But on Facebook, it just.
So it's a platform-specific issue.
And it may not even be today, right? It was a platform-specific issue 2 years ago, right? But 2 years ago, the average Facebook gamer who played him was trying to target was not ready to wrap their head around a game like Tripletown, period, end of story. I mean, we made 3 different versions of the tutorial. Like, nothing stuck. Nothing worked. Every change we made, by the way, this is the most demoralizing thing that ever happened to you. Every change we made to the tutorial made retention worse. We were like, okay, I give up.
Is that why you had your head shaved that time? Okay, so we've discussed, and I think this is a good segue into the whole idea. And I talk about this in some work that I do in terms of the consumer really wanting to have creative connection to the developer, and that's probably the DNA of why independent games are going to be more and more successful. And I call it the disintermediation of games, where we're moving from being a publisher-centric to a developer-centric model. It's happening in lots of industries, make robotic, privatized, or healthcare that's going to be more independent and individualized. So you'll see it in almost every segment. We're going from this meta to the micro, and Kickstarter is a great symptom of this, right? Where they want to, you're building community for your game before you even build your game, which that's next to impossible. If you had a game that you wanted to get PR for and build community around, it would be very difficult to go out and get a lot of people excited about it, because demos don't do it, and even alpha tech releases used to get us in a lot of trouble over the years. So reality is we've got a new way to connect to the consumer, but that just means that we've got a lot more community management to do. What have you seen in your organization? You hear from a big player, you can speak from, but you've been through a lot of these cycles.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting challenges, we were debating this last night at dinner, the example I would use with community involvement, take popular movies. How many people would want to go see a movie that was produced or directed by the audience from a Comic-Con session? I don't see any hands. None. How many would go see a J.J. Abrams movie? Right. And would go to Comic-Con to hear J.J. Abrams talk? I mean, there's a delicate balance between kind of the auteur-driven creator of an experience you all want to invest in, and them understanding the investment of the audience and being receptive to that, versus letting that audience dictate the direction of where they're going to go. And I think that's the delicate balance that we deal with in community management. And I think people tend to look at community management as a little bit of voodoo, and I more simply kind of divide community management back down to, at a base level, oversimplifying, customer support, and on the other hand, stealthy marketing. I mean, it's a way to invest your audience in what you're doing, let them know that they're listened to. You may not be reacting to everything they say, right. But building that connection with the audience. And I go back to some of the early work I did on MMOs, some with Rich and some other companies. MMO developers very early on started listening to essentially the lunatic fringe. You had 10% of the audience was active in the forums, and 1% of them were generating 95% of the traffic. Yep. And do you really want to build a game?
That's how we run our government.
Do you want to build a game that is catering to the crazy guy in the back of the bus? No. You want to.
Okay, so maybe we don't like our government either. But so, to your point though, you've got to know how to listen and how to bring that back to the design issues that are existing, and figure out what to give them. And Rich, you and I have talked about this. They don't know what they want. They don't know what they want, even if sometimes they see it. But in many cases, until they play it, they don't know that they don't like it. And so it's at that point that you have to actually see that moment of truth.
In many ways,
be honest with yourself.
I view community feedback and metrics the same way. They're data points for a smart designer to consider and then figure out what's really going on and make a plan and execute against it.
How many
And then
times when
test
you
that.
look at data points out of analytics, do you make the wrong assumption as to why you think you're getting that?
So the way I approach analytics is I look at what I think is happening. Okay, so this is happening, and then I develop a hypothesis about what do I think is going on, and then I figure out an experiment where I could prove or disprove that, implement it in the game, prove or disprove, and the goal is to disprove the hypothesis so that you can say, that's where you're trying to go. That's typical scientific method. So it's basically, people don't necessarily say what they actually do. So you have to look at what they're doing. And a lot of times you'll see people in the community saying, oh, I don't buy my way through, that's pay to win. And you look at their, analytics, yeah, you do.
World of Tanks.
Which, by the way, is an important thing to have opportunities for people to buy that aren't necessarily visible to other players. Because then people want to do to power themselves up without actually being a pariah in the community.
Yeah, this is why experience point boosters and things like that have become so popular. Like World of Tanks recently announced that they were going to remove most of the quote-unquote pay-to-win things from their game, and they were just going to try to drive most of their revenue from things like aesthetic goods, but mostly just things like, you get 50% extra experience or double experience, whatever, for the next 24 hours. And it's for exactly what you just said. Nobody can tell that you're leveling up twice as fast. And if the game is balanced right, it doesn't even matter, quite frankly. If you're in a PvP game and you're matching people of equal level against each other, who cares how quickly someone levels up, right? So things like that make a big difference.
I think also blurring the line between people's kind of native free experience and the things they pay for. So World of Tanks, the fact that you finish a session and they give you a readout of how much XP you've generated and how much currency, silver or gold you've generated, and right next to it, conveniently in the column, is here's what you would have had if you'd been a subscriber.
Right.
Oh, and subscribe now, and we'll give you that amount that you would have got. So it's not pay to win; it's pay to get more of a bonus for what you just did.
Yep.
So we really have to pay attention to the casinos more, because they've been doing this stuff for a while, right? I mean, so how many people here think of analytics as one of the primary disciplines you need to be schooled in order to make a successful game title? Okay, because I think if I'd asked that question 2 years ago, they would have said analytics, because we weren't instrumenting things until, Zynga did, I think, was the bigger animal in the room. But even out of Asia, which pay to win obviously works a whole different method than it does here in North America and Europe. That wasn't like something that they paid as much attention to as now. GRI has 12 analysts on every title that they do,
right.
And they do scrums on a daily basis to fix stuff and test stuff as they go out.
So to the first question you asked earlier about kind of the hardest thing we're facing now, and I think David's definitely right about the first 45 seconds to 5 minutes, getting somebody over that hurdle. I think that's the hardest from a design standpoint. My answer was going to be more...
especially true on mobile.
Yeah,
Mobile is even
my answer
shorter
was,
attention span.
My answer to that question, though, was from more of a technological standpoint, was the approach to tools and technology and data, and not just a choice, having come just out of PopCap and having EA's resources behind that, having any tool you'd want to use, from Swerve to Contagion to whatever, it's on one hand you have to make a decision about what tools to use. On the other, you have to make sure that the team is kind of psychologically prepared to engage at that kind of level. To say, okay, number one, we're not going to look at data until we've proven the core tenets of our design. We've got something kind of the crucible is proven. Now we're going to take that out and prove it, test it, and we're going to be open to the fact that it may be a complete flop.
Yeah. There's actually a third thing which is particularly relevant for indies here who have limited resources that you should really be aware of. It is really easy, if you're just kind of throwing the analytics in as quickly as you can with a small team, to end up in a situation where you actually have done it wrong. You did, like, there's a bug in the code, you're not reporting the things that you think you're reporting in the way that you think you're reporting them, and then you'll literally make bad decisions based on bad analytics. This has happened to us twice, and we're not we're not that small anymore. We have a full-time analytics person who's there
smart
to
people.
catch. Yeah, I mean, we have good engineers doing the integration. We have a full-time analytics person making sure that the integration is working out. And even then, I mean, High Grounds, just recently on High Grounds, we were like, oh crap, like there's a bug and we're radically distorting our retention numbers. Oops, we've been making decisions on these retention numbers for a month now. Okay, so like, I mean, again, so be aware that if you're going to do the analytics thing, please don't just be like, well, just jam it in and it'll all be good. Like, you could actually do more damage to yourself than good.
You need to test it.
You need to validate the data and make damn sure that you're actually reporting what you think you're reporting.
You also need to be prepared to go through the rigor it takes to get the right data out of those. As an example, project that I recently worked on, we had EA has a site license to Swerve, so we were prepared to use Swerve for A/B testing, and one of the teams decided that, number one, they tried to argue Swerve was too expensive until I pointed out our site license. Then they chose to argue that implementing Swerve was going to take too many resources and be too time intensive, so they were going to implement their own solution. My argument back to them is maybe you don't understand what you're going, the premise of what you're going to try to test
I've
well
seen
enough.
people stitch Google Analytics together with,
Well,
fair 4 to 8 months worth of work to get almost there.
so this team chose to implement their own A/B testing solution instead of Swerve. We go through, fine, we go through a couple of A/B tests and we get some reasonably good data out, and then we decided, a couple of product managers on my team, we broached the discussion about changing a part of the funnel. We come to find out that what they chose to implement as their A/B testing solution couldn't actually change layout. Bummer. Little bit more foresight on evaluation of tools.
Yeah. That said, for whatever it's worth, I know not necessarily everyone here can afford to go and use a Swerve or a Contagion or anything like that. And so, I mean, we started out by hacking Google Analytics, and it wasn't pretty, but it worked. But like I said, again, if you do it, just be super careful.
The other thing to be careful, especially if you're doing mobile, is just how big those plugins, because you have plugin creep where you can find you've got 15 different plugins that are adding like 10 megs, 15 megs to your download size, and if that's pushing you over the 50 meg OTA limit, you're massively reducing your organic download.
And you got to be careful with third-party SDKs in general in mobile, right? I mean, you have more than a couple of those in your game, and everyone, like, your game is going to be breaking constantly for reasons that have nothing to do with you, right? Like, Apple released a new version of the iOS. Oops, one of your 10 SDKs isn't compatible with that. Your game's now broken. Like, you just don't want those headaches. We have a super high bar for SDKs in our games in general. Like, unless there's an incredibly good reason for it, it's not in our game.
Yeah, so it affects both download size and memory, because suddenly, one of the plugins I'm thinking of has like 10 meg memory overhead, which pretty much blows out the 3GS and lower end devices. So.
David, would you you've set the bar. What are the ones you're putting in?
Oh, gosh, not that many, honestly. I mean, we have Contagion, although, to be honest, even with their, we actually, for a while, we're like, we're not going to use our SDK, we're just going to hand code our own thing, and then plug that into Contagion. So I think we finally have decided to start using theirs. We have 2 advertising providers in there. We have Vungle and Brand Boost, just because, can't do it without their SDKs. And that's it. Right now, that's literally the only third-party SDKs that we're using. We're looking at exploring Keep as well, again, for the revenue. Oh, sorry, no, that's not true. I forgot Tapjoy. We have Tapjoy in there as well. Again, for making money, but that's it. And all of those things we tested pretty carefully, and we'll still rip out in a heartbeat if they start flaking out on us. I mean, none of them are considered, with the exception of analytics, none of those are really considered crucial to us.
But do they generate enough revenue to make it a good return on investment?
I mean, in general, they have. The problem, of course, is that it's a chicken and egg thing. I mean, if you have a lot of users, then advertising makes you a good amount of money. And if you don't have a lot of users, then it was a waste to integrate it, right? But if you don't integrate it up front, then you get a bunch of people who are accustomed to a game without ads, which is in and of itself not necessarily a great thing, because when you finally do add advertising, they're going to be pissed off. So, we generally bite the bullet and put in 1 or 2, assuming that we want to have ads in the game at all, which we don't always do. And I mean, it has generally paid out for us. But it's not trivial. I mean, I don't know how often it is, every 5 or 6 months, one of those guys will be like, you have to update our SDK and you have to do it right now, because there's an issue. Oops. Okay.
The UDID thing being the most recent one.
Right.
You had to update 3 or 4 SDKs because Apple officially said they can't use UDID. We didn't in the game, but plugin providers did. So we had to.
Well,
take
they've
the
given
new
you your
versions.
notice on that.
Yeah, but they didn't actually
The year
fix
goes
it
fast.
until right when it was. They said you can't submit anymore. So we were having
Right.
to integrate them in
They
the
didn't
last
tell you
one.
how they're going to draw the line.
Yeah.
And Facebook, worst
Yeah.
case of all that in line.
But you're at the mercy of the third-party plugin to get, their house in order too.
We've talked a little bit about community, but what do you do to, you said it, forums, 10% of the people actually post on them, and we consider that our community. How is it that you engage? How is it you listen? How is it that you put more, because now we own our own customers, but we don't even know who they are. Are you using email? Are you using, what kind of CRM are you using? Are you using any analytics like Playnomics that would allow you to target the actual type of player they are in the game, how they play, when a good messaging time is for that particular profile?
So right now I'm spending, we just took over operation of the game on Tuesday morning. So I'm spending 8 to 10 hours a day talking to the community right now. I'm talking in the forums. I'm talking in-game and global chat because we have chat in the game. I'm talking in-game mail. I'm talking over email through support. I'm answering tickets. And, it's amazing how much just being responsive like that, people love that, just listening to them and knowing that the developers are there and they're part of the community and they're being listened to and, just being transparent with them about what's coming.
Yeah, they see a transition. They're not, they saw Glue lay people off, et cetera, and they're all talking, I'm sure. So just giving them that reassurance is making sure you're dealing with your retention issues in some ways.
Yeah, so it's very important to be engaged with the community so that, because it actually does help retention. If you've got a game where you've got these social features, leverage them, use them, talk to people. And another thing that we're looking at is I've got community members that I've talked to that are so happy about me talking to them that they've offered to help moderate forums. I live in Hong Kong. I'm on when you guys are asleep. Can I help out in the evening? So you can deputize people and, kind of spread the messaging. But just being really transparent and really consistent with people goes a long way.
Sometimes they deputize themselves.
Yeah, it's great.
I think it's a forum war, just for fun.
It's also important it's important to engage kind of from the grassroots up to make the audience feel like they're heard. But I also think if you look at some of the most successful Kickstarter campaigns, look at what Jordan and Mitch have done with Shadowrun. Look at what Tim Schafer's doing. There's engaging from the bottom up, but there's also this kind of liberating aspect. I use the kind of auteur term. You get the originators of some of these great bases of IP who are so obviously passionate about what they've created. They're not necessarily, yes, they're listening to the community and what's resonating, but what they're really looking for is the opportunity to talk directly to their audience with as few kind of corruptions of their message as possible.
And to create the appetite as well as, to scratch the itch afterwards.
And there's a certain level of the genuine aspect of that message that I think is a big part of what resonates, where they're not, look at what Jordan and Mitch put out leading up through the Shadowrun Kickstarter. It was all about the product. It wasn't spin, it wasn't marketing, it wasn't BS marketing copy. It was, here are all the features, here's the content, here are the ways we're going to let you play with each other. It was all just a complete brain dump about the game, and that's what the audience engaged with.
The video is like the make or break, and a lot of people are finding the more polished it is, the less people think they need your money, because you're spending 50 grand on a video you must not need us,
Right.
And that has had a backlash, and there's a lot of other things in Kickstarters that can alienate an audience. But obviously, these are people that already have some brand exposure and have created IP we know about. In the audience, I don't know that we have a lot of those opportunities. Getting that chance to actually be transparent and connect directly to your community before you launch.
Comment.
Go for it.
So my question is on marketing for indies. And my husband and I were fortunate that we did a Kickstarter. We have a licensed IP, Girl Genius, that comes with its own marketing engine. But for a lot of independents, that's not going to be the case. Do you have any suggestions for independents on how to reach a new audience? Or an audience when you have a new product?
Well, I mean, there's all the traditional things that you can do that are somewhat low cost, the PR and that sort of thing. But a lot of it's, in some cases, getting distribution. I mean, it's not like you're going to be able to afford to put 50 grand into promoting your own title. So what do? You go to find the guys that already have these marketplaces, and when you have a title that fits their appetite and portfolio, and they want to spend on your title to exploit it in the market, that's where you're still a self-publisher, but you're using distribution channels to do that, and that's where you get big economies of scale. There's everything from webcomics to 3D printing now. There's a huge plethora of opportunity to build brand, but it still all takes money and focus.
There have historically been two indie strategies for this, right? I mean, strategy number one, which was particularly visible when XBLA first, started getting off the ground, was just steady drum beat of news about my game before I release it, right? Like putting out cool concept art and trailers and this and that, and doing whatever the hell I could to get, Joystick and Kotaku and all those other sites to write about it, which worked for some developers, didn't work for others, depended on obviously the quality of the game, the fact whether the indie had a name or not before they released, et cetera, et cetera. But there were some complete no-name indies who put out some just really snazzy marketing materials that managed to get, like the guys who made Limbo weren't, I don't think anybody knew who the hell they were before Limbo, but Limbo looked cool and they were talking about it for a hell of a long time before it came out. And anyway, so that's one strategy, and it's always been a viable strategy, but it's time consuming and it may not cost a lot of money up front in terms of like you're not buying you're not buying advertising, but you're spending a lot of time and effort on the activities. And then the other thing is make a free game and then release it on as many platforms as possible and hope that you just reach a lot of people that way. And that model does actually still work pretty well. Not if you focus exclusively on mobile, for example. Like if you're one of those people who's like, I'm going to make a free game, I'm only going to release it on iOS, and then you don't get any users, well, that's your damn fault. I mean, you put the game in one place and you didn't spend any money marketing it. What did you expect to happen? But if you took that same game and you made it cross-platform and cross-play and put it on Congregate and Newgrounds and Armor Games and your own website and iOS and Google Play and Amazon Store, hope and Steam, because Steam, even if you can't, some people can't get green lights today, but they've already announced that eventually they're going to just get rid of that whole process and just let anyone publish on there. Like, you put it in enough places and you make it free, odds are, in at least one place you're going to get a few thousand users, and if they like it, maybe they'll tell a few more people, and you can put some viral hooks into it and so on and so forth. So in general, what I recommend is, if you can, you do both, right? But most people don't have the time and energy to do both. And if I had to pick between one of those two things, every time I'd pick the second one. Just make it free, put it as many places as possible.
So you were discussing being active in the forums and answering tickets and talking in that. The one caveat I'd put on that from painful experience is, as things get to the point where you're going to be bringing in a community management team, you're big enough that you're actually going to pull the developers back to actually develop and a little bit away from the community. That transition in a forums has to be handled very, very carefully, or you can completely blow up your community in a fiery internet rage.
Yeah, you can't cut off immediate. It has to be a tapering off, and you have to introduce new voices. It's a mix with the old voices, and then they start hearing more and more from the new voice rather than the old voice.
When you had community support on this game prior, so this was kind of the exact opposite. They were used to a lot of people talking to them, and now, it's the guy that now owns it. So.
Right.
They're used to nobody talking. Toward the end.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
So we've addressed kind of the analytics piece, the community management. There's finance, obviously, which probably is its own session in terms of being able to raise the kind of capital you need to build a competitive product in the marketplace. I think the previous session did an exceptionally good job of talking about differentiating look and feel so that you actually have something that's distinctive and can grab people's attention and have, because everybody's using a lot of the same tool sets. So, even lighting models and that sort of thing are difficult sometimes to get so that you actually have a unique look and feel to them and you get, the camera and the rest of it to work. When you look at, that whole exploiting a brand and building an IP and exploiting it in the marketplace, how do you scale that kind of core competency over a small portfolio? Because that's something we're in publisher world, right? we had multiple titles that would justify those kind of initiatives and licensing and all the rest that you can do.
Yeah,
Vinny, you done merchandise?
Go ahead.
I mean,
Plushies?
we tried the plushie route. It's a lot of work. And, it's more often than not. Like Tripletown's a good example, right? It has millions of players at this point. Really cute bears, the quote-unquote mascot. You would think that if you're going to make an IP out of anything, that would be a good place to start. And of course we are, but it's not clear that if we're doing what I've been saying we're doing, and we're trying to build a core competency of like building like a free game that is compelling, that people want, that will engage people right from the beginning, keep them for weeks, get them to tell their friends about it, and it hasn't been clear to us that there's really, all those things are also what you hope IP will do, right? So it becomes a little bit less important for us. Yes, we still want to develop our IP, but we also want to make original new things that grab people's attention. And so making Tripletown 2 hasn't been a super high priority for us. You know what I mean? I'm not saying that...
So you're not announcing Tripletown the movie here today?
No, not announcing Tripletown the movie.
The flip book?
Not even the flip book. But and don't get me wrong. I don't want to blow like.
Episode 3.
Yeah, for sure. We actually have the Bears are making a cameo in Road Not Taken, one of our upcoming games, so that will be there. But in general, I guess I don't want to blow it out. Like IP development is important, and if you can do it. That's great. But I guess it's hard. Like you wouldn't even choose to do it unless you had a big hit. Like it makes perfect sense for Angry Birds 2 to come out and for Angry Birds toys to be everywhere, right? Because Angry Birds has millions and millions and millions, like literally hundreds of millions of people who are familiar with it, and the movie. So it makes sense. But if you've got a game, like most indies, 99% of indies, if you've got a game with less than 1 million people who've played it, then there's a strong argument for maybe you should be trying to make your next interesting thing and not worrying too much about your IP that has 50,000 people who know it.
But you did partner with Playdom to help take some of that pressure off you at a moment.
That wasn't for the IP, though. That wasn't so they would grow the IP. That was literally a tactical decision of, we don't know how to acquire more users on Facebook. Yeah. Please bring more eyeballs to Tripletown on Facebook.
Well,
and then it turned out that they were no better at it than we were.
That getting more audience is part of building a strong IP portfolio. So, you have player base. But in that, and I'm talking about exploiting it. So have you done anything to take it international or to?
Yes. Oh, good question. So it's really like, particularly in Asia, for example, that market is different enough from ours that like our limited attempts to do it on our own, like we've localized our own games. Actually, my business partner Daniel, his wife Aya, is a professional translator, Japanese translator, so brilliant, right? So she translated, Tripletown beautifully. It's the best possible translation you could ever ask for, and the art seems like it would be appealing to a Japanese audience, given traditionally what's popular there. And yet the game hasn't really made any traction there, partially because we don't know the first thing about marketing it. We don't have a lot of relationships in Japan, et cetera, et cetera. So consequently, we and most other indies that I know tend to find international publishers. Even though we're very averse to working with publishers here in the US, we are more than willing to sign a publishing agreement in Japan or in Korea or something like that. Unfortunately, that's also been tricky for us. Like, it's been very hard to find a publisher. Like, a lot of these international publishers, their strategy is essentially, actually this is true of US publishers too, their strategy is essentially sign as many deals as I possibly can and hope that one of them turns into a lottery ticket. So they put very little effort oftentimes into your game, and even when they put a fair amount of effort, the results in our experience have been decidedly mixed. So one thing that I would highly recommend if you're thinking about doing a deal with international publishers, ask as many people as you can, like, who have you published with, would you recommend them, what went right, what went wrong. Again, this would be a thing where I could probably spend an hour talking about it, and I don't want to dominate the conversation. So just to say, there's a lot of pitfalls, so don't stumble into them accidentally. And we learned, for example, I was doing this stuff. I was taking my own advice, and we haven't signed a single deal with a publisher that wasn't recommended to us. One thing I've learned is one recommendation is probably not enough. You probably want 3 or 4 recommendations. Did you do due diligence? Go out and talk to the most successful developers to see if they like them? Lately we have. When we started, we had, for example, we had one friend who we trusted a lot, who has a lot of experience in mobile. We were like, hey, can you recommend an international publisher? Oh, these guys are great. We've been working for them a long time. They've done very well by us. Cool. Okay, that's all I need to hear. And then obviously the deal had to be right, and the deal was fine. No, it turns out that the reason that publisher, that my friend, the developer that was a friend of ours, was being taken care of so well by that publisher is because the friend of ours is a very, very big developer who you wouldn't dare cross because their games are very successful, and you want to do right by them because it's going to work out for you. Their games, tens of times the population of Tripletown, right? So yeah, when it came to a game like Tripletown, or Steambirds or any of our other games, publishers ended up being a lot less willing to invest the effort that they did on behalf of our friends. So that was one lesson we learned, was like, hey, just because you get a reference from someone big who tends to command respect doesn't mean that you can expect the same treatment. So now we make a point of asking people who are our size who they would recommend. It's just one example.
Again, business sophistication being almost as important as game design in some cases.
Oh, yes.
So having a good attorney, making sure that you know your numbers and are running your operation tightly.
Yep.
John, you've been through multiple different companies, and obviously I think of PopCap when they're tiny, and now obviously they've gone through the full cycle. They've exited and are being downsized, which that just seems to be the cycle, right? What did you see that would be good takeaways for independents out of their best practices? I mean, one of the things I always think of is they would try a bunch of stuff, prototype it, and kill it when it wasn't fun, and there was very few IPs that they really bled on until they knew that it was awesome.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I learned from EA that was really interesting, as I was, having come from Microsoft, I was one of the few people at PopCap that had worked at companies larger than PopCap before that. And so I was a part of the envoy from PopCap that would go to EA and try to figure out what technologies to embrace, what to adopt, what to try to transfer from PopCap to EA and vice versa. And spending time talking to the FIFA guys was probably the biggest eye-opener when you think about all the touch points for FIFA on Facebook, on mobile, on console, on PC, and talking to Matt Bilby, who runs that business. They know, I mean, anybody who thinks that the latest kind of NSA stuff you're seeing about, sniffing is a big deal, think about what a game publisher knows about your behavior in their game. I mean, they know exactly when to toss an ad to somebody in a freemium experience. They know exactly when to put a pinch point in FIFA on console based on your, the likely play patterns, and the degree to which they've been able to profile that is amazing. So we at PopCap thought, we're very savvy at this kind of customer lifecycle management, and then we talked to the FIFA guys and we realized we didn't know jack compared to what they knew, and it all comes down to that kind of perspective on, the duration of your customer's engagement with your game, and if somebody's going to be playing, what is your kind of active life cycle for a customer's experience? Is it the first 5 minutes for people who are going to bomb out? Is it 6 months for a typical Facebook game somebody might get deeply engaged in? Or is it 5 or 6 years, like a FIFA customer, a Madden customer, somebody like that?
Because your lifetime value drives what you can afford in any kind of acquisition.
Right.
Right. So let's questions while you've already asked. Becker.
Yeah, so you mentioned, David, that you use Playdom, but now you don't use publishers. You prefer to avoid them except for international.
Yeah, except for international.
So what have you replaced them with?
With ourselves?
So in terms of, you mentioned you went with Playdom to drive Facebook users.
Yeah.
You found another method to do that doesn't use publishers.
So distribution and publishing sometimes get commingled. And, when you say Congregate and Armor Games and a bunch of other portal-type distribution, there's kind of a blurry line because they'll even sometimes call themselves publishers. But I think that's where, doing each of those deals yourself and owning each of those relationships is different than going to somebody else and saying, exploit this for us in the marketplace.
Yeah, so typically what you expect from a publisher is if like a Playdom or a Zynga or an EA or et cetera, you go to them and they're going to take care of the marketing for you and distribution. What does that mean? They're going to sign the distribution deals and hopefully get you featured, and they're also going to do paid user acquisition, right? So they're going to, which used to be is just like, hey, we're going to put up ads for you, maybe, and hope that they drive traffic. Now it's a much more concrete thing of, I'm going to pay X to Tapjoy, and Tapjoy is going to drive 10,000 installs, which we can track and actually see, blah, blah, blah. But actually I've been writing a lot about this lately, trying to, every time we get I have a thing now that I just send to every publisher who contacts us. And what basically it's, I think there's this weird perverse thing that happens with publishers nowadays, where most of them have decided that the way they're going to promote, and for good reason, have decided the way that they're going to market a game is they're going to observe the metrics of the game, and then, so for example, if they decide, on this platform with this audience, users' lifetime value based on our observations is 30 cents. That's what the average user is worth. Some users are worth obviously more, some users are worth less. So that's that. We can spend up to 30 cents. Actually, it's not, to acquire users, except for it's not up to 30 cents. It's 30 cents minus the platform's cut, minus whatever rev share the developer gets, right? So if the publisher didn't exist, you would say, okay, well, I can spend 30 cents minus the 30% that Facebook or Apple or Google takes or whatever, and that's what I can spend on users. But because you're splitting, your revenue with the publisher on some level, now the bar for user acquisition has gotten much higher. Now you can't afford to spend 30 cents minus 30%. It's 30%. It's 30 cents minus 30% minus 50% or whatever your rev share is. And there's where it gets really nasty, because if you've self-funded this game and developed this game, you're doing all the work to support this game, then you probably don't want to do a 50-50 rev share deal with the publisher, right? You probably feel like you deserve better than that, 70-30, 75-25, whatever it is, the number that you think is fair. But now you've made it even harder for them to justify marketing your game, because they're only getting 25% of 30% of the total, right? So that's how much they can justify spending on marketing this game. And obviously, there's some nuance here. Spending can get you into the top charts, which gets you some free organic traffic, blah, blah, blah. Let's not get lost in the weeds. The bottom line is, when you do a deal with a publisher, by definition, you have now made it harder to acquire traffic for your game. Like, by definition. So the only reason you would do a deal with a publisher is if you feel like they are 2, 3, 4 times more efficient at acquiring traffic than you are, which could be true in some cases, actually. There are some scenarios, particularly if you're like a one-man indie studio who's never done this before, has no relationships, you're totally clueless. Okay, you probably need a publisher, right? But if you're a little bit more prepared than that to get your game out there, by definition, the economics are against a publishing deal. I just don't see it. I mean, and there's a lot of other reasons why. I mean, I'm not even getting into my response to publishers has gotten quite long.
Yes, we've got time. The orchestra started playing.
Oh yes,
I believe that, and they're trying to get our attention.
Yes. 7 minutes. Anyway, to make a very long story short,
ourselves talk. How about
yes.
you guys?
Just to conclude that thought.
Finish the thought.
Yeah. So just to conclude that thought, like the economics aren't in your favor. There's questions about who's going to own the customer. There's a lot of different things that basically end up making it not worth it. And so we as a company have decided we're just going to try to do everything ourselves. We have good relationships with Apple, good relationships with Google, blah blah blah. We're learning about user acquisition. It is admittedly harder than it looks like to do it cost effectively, and so but again, when with Tripletown and Playdom, we saw it very clear that like the metrics of the game simply weren't good enough for them to acquire users, and so they didn't. Period. End of story. Like that, they're a one-trick pony, right? We cross-promote a game with our internal traffic, and then we use these systems that we know to do paid user acquisition. And if those two things don't seem like they're working, well, I guess we're done. Like they have no other tactics. They have no other strategies. So given that that's the way publishing seems to work nowadays, I just don't see why you would ever do it unless you absolutely were desperate.
Thank you. You see we are done. Oh, we have 5 minutes. Okay. Well, thanks for the applause. Keep that up. We want to hear more. So as an encore, the guy behind Dave.
So free-to-play games as a service, I hear 10% of your users are the vocal minority, right? I hear 2% are the payers. Is there a correlation there? Does that make sense? Is that 2%, 2% from the same group? Is one?
Not necessarily.
Well, it's not even the payers that we pay attention. For the whale thing, right?
Yeah, 1%.
Yeah.
I guess if you are running games as a service, who do you listen to? Do you listen to looking metrics more than your vocal minority, or those guys who are yelling the most actually the ones who are paying?
I tend to look at metrics first, kind of CS call logs second, and then community traffic third. And I almost treat the community traffic as kind of the canary in the coal mine. The louder the cacophony of voices gets, the more likely there's a problem. But Rich said earlier, people won't often say, they'll say what they think they need to say to get the result from you that they want. They won't say what their actual issue is.
Right.
So it's important not to necessarily listen to what they're saying. It's important to listen to the fact that they're talking and understand who they are and what where they are in the life cycle of your game, and then look for the root issues. You know, I have a 10-year-old and a 13-year-old, and I use the same techniques with them.
So to add a little bit, sometimes that 2% is not necessarily the vocal minority. Sometimes they're the silent spenders, and sometimes you want to pay attention to those guys, but sometimes you want to pay attention to the 98% who aren't spending, right? And a lot of what you're doing is bucket migration, is what I call it, is basically you're trying to turn people that haven't spent into people that have spent up to $5, and then turn the people that have spent up to $5 into people that have spent up to $20. So you need to segment your audience and understand where those different people are. And you know, in terms of community, it's worth noting, what I've found is that the higher they are on the spender, the more likely they are engaged in the community. But
it's not a given, but
not a given.
It's likely. I mean, to be clear, it's not like the only person who matters is the person who pays or might pay. We have some users in our forums who we love. They've clearly never spent a penny and probably never will spend a penny, but they're super active. Like, they keep our wiki up to date.
They're connectors.
They're always out there defending us if anyone's criticizing us, and they're wonderful. I mean, in some ways, they're better customers than many of the people who are paying money. So
They're your proactive virals, right?
Yeah, if your calculation of your lifetime value of a customer doesn't include what I call, the Clairol effect, the so on and so on viral bit, then you're not looking at your audience the right way.
Yeah. This, by the way, is like the analytics industry in general is still kind of, it's so nascent. It's just barely, like, it's shockingly rudimentary when you compare our analytics in this industry to the analytics of, say, like retail, which has been doing it for a really long time. You would be blown away by how basic we are. When I was first trying to sign up with an analytics provider, we did this exhaustive search of all the different providers out there, and the depressing conclusion was they all suck. And I asked a bunch of friends, and they were like, yeah, no, your conclusion's right, they all suck. But I've recently been talking to a bunch of startups who are entering the space, and they're all thinking of doing interesting things. Like, for example, speaking of network analysis, like, there's one company called Ninjametrics that I've been, advising recently. And those guys have this wonderful system that basically looks at how players influence other players in the game, as well as how much money they're spending and a bunch of other factors, and then come up with a total value of the user, which includes things that have nothing to do with how much money they're spending. Like, oh, that's weird. Every time this guy's in a multiplayer match with other people, those people quit the game. This guy's got a negative value. He's literally worth $-. Doesn't matter how much he's spending.
That's
right?
the Gabe Newell effect.
So like that, I mean, like that kind of stuff is really cool, and that stuff's coming to our industry. But right now, if you sign up with an analytics platform, even a very expensive one, you will be shocked at how little it gives you automatically.
Say the name of that company again?
Ninjametrics?
Ninjametrics. But they're still, I mean, they're just getting, like, they're still in the very early stages. Yeah.
Okay, Dave.
So with the bundle, the golden handcuffs, what do you do when the time comes to shut down a game?
Sell it.
The people have done it enough.
Yeah.
Rich likes orphans.
So it depends. I mean, it depends on the game. I mean, if you look at Asheron's Call, for a big publisher like Microsoft, it didn't make sense to continue running it. Yet Asheron's Call, even though it was published in 2000, I don't remember, 2000, yeah. Couldn't remember if it was 2000 or 2001, it's still running today because Turbine picked it up, and it doesn't cost them much to run, and they still make money. It's just a low amount of money. Mm-hmm. So it depends on whether you can establish a user base and have the operational costs low enough that you can continue to operate it indefinitely. If it takes, a few hours a week of somebody's time, that's not very expensive. But you need to be prepared.
So we need more museums to actually pay to run these things.
Yeah, but there's going to be times when it just doesn't make sense just for opportunity costs. It's taking too many resources that you could be using on something else. And then you need to figure out how you're going to communicate that to users. I recommend not just turning it off one day because they'll hate you forever. Yeah. But you need to start communicating and letting people know that this is coming.
Yeah, I would actually be, I think there are theoretical and not so theoretical scenarios where shutting down a game really is your only option financially speaking.
Yeah.
But in general, I think it's a very bad idea to shut games down, even if they're not profitable. Like even if they're just breaking even or just losing a tiny bit of money every month. Like the fact of the matter is, you have people who are presumably been playing the game a long time, who've built a huge investment in it, and when you shut it down, you're basically saying to them, you can never trust a game my company makes. It may disappear on you after you've spent tons of time and effort and potentially money investing yourself in that game. So for us, I mean, thank God we've never had to shut down a game, and like I'll bend over backwards to avoid having to do it. I may have to do it someday for some reason, but
I've
I
heard
won't.
people say that about Zynga.
Oh, yeah.
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 Oh yeah. I mean, why would you? I mean, if you know that they're willing to just shut down 18 games in a moment's notice, why would you invest yourself heavily in any of their games? It just doesn't make sense as a player, you know.
I mean, there was an article yesterday just about player equity, right, and how to build them in conversation. Okay, so did we get everybody's question? I don't want to leave anybody out who has been holding their hand up. And
All right, time.
okay, one last quick question.
David, you mentioned that different cultures perceive play to win differently. Is there any culture out there that's like, these are the whales and we should go after them?
Meaning, like, pay to win is good for those cultures?
Yeah. Like where we're actually better than the United States.
Yeah, I mean, historically, it's done better in Asia and China, you know, China, Japan, Korea than it has here. But even in those places, my understanding, and again, I'm not an expert. Excuse me.
We paid him to actually wake you guys up momentarily.
Right, with the occasional. Sorry, with allergies. Even in those markets, my understanding is pay to win is starting to wane as a strategy. It's always been bigger there than it is here. But I mean, again, the thing about pay to win is that it's actually very crude. There are much more interesting, much more subtle ways to get people to spend money. And the problem is that when you have this conversation, the first thing that typically jumps to the average person's mind who isn't really experienced with free-to-play is, oh, you mean like selling clothing and pets and stuff like that, right? No, I don't actually mean that. You can do that, but you can make decent money, but it'll probably be no more than 20% of your revenue if you're being smart and selling stuff that actually has a functional benefit in the game. People always spend more on stuff that has a functional benefit in the game than stuff that just merely looks pretty. That we all like to think that that's not the case, but it is the case. I've tested this personally in a number of different contexts. But again, the point is you be subtle about it. For example, if you do the XP booster, which A, other people don't know that you've paid for, and B, even if they do, they shouldn't care, because in matchmaking, people of equal level are being matched against each other. So the person who's paying isn't at an advantage. You know, no issues, right? And there's lots of other things you can do. You can, you know, we.
Is this the secret sauce right now? This is the thing you want to walk on with.
Now I feel
Because
the pressure's on. Like in Realm of the Mad God, you know, we sold like, hey, you want to play Realm of the Mad God? You can play it totally for free with this one character. And you know, when he dies, you can start another character because it's a permadeath game. Oh, you want to play with 3 different characters at the same time? Okay, well you have to pay for the privilege. That's a functional benefit in the game, but it's not pay to win, right? There's nothing. You can win just as much as the next guy with your one character, but if you want the convenience and enjoyment of playing with 3 different characters, you have to pay for it. Things like that, you know, are good ways to make money that have nothing to do with pay to win.
Yeah, friends of mine are making a digital CCG, and they're, as opposed to a
Collectible card game, everybody knows, right?
As opposed to a pay-to-win model, they have a pay-to-not-die mechanic. So you're playing through a series of adventures. Think of a D&D-like campaign. Your party has to survive 3 or 4 separate engagements. You may lose a character in any individual one. You get to the last one. If you die then, you have to go back and play all of them. So you can pay $2.95 to revive your party.
Right. And that's pay
so
for
it's-
convenience.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, because you could just play it again if you wanted to.
Right.
All right, guys.
Thank you.